What that alien showed me about Jesus destroyed everything I thought I knew about God. I don't tell this to many people anymore. Not because I'm afraid of being called crazy, though that happens plenty, but because once you've seen the truth, words feel like cardboard trying to describe a storm. Still, if you're hearing this, I guess I owe the story to someone who might still be searching the way I was. My name doesn't matter much. I was a mechanic in a desert town, so forgotten even the dust seemed bored. I fixed engines that belonged to men who didn't care to talk, and I drank enough at night to forget my own silence. Back then I didn't believe in anything. Not God, not destiny, not some invisible plan. I used to think people invented faith because they couldn't handle the emptiness. Then one night, the emptiness stared back. Rodney Morrison lived on the edge of the Nevada desert, 20 miles from the highway, where the land flattened into a horizon that looked like eternity itself had run out of ideas. He was 42, skin burnt from years under sun, hands lined with grease and regret. The garage he worked in doubled as his home, a metal shack with one cot, one fridge, one Bible he hadn't opened since his father's funeral. The nights were silent except for coyotes and the low hum of generators from a mining site that had been abandoned years ago. It was the kind of place people forgot on purpose. The first sign came 3 nights after the power went out in half the county. The sky was clear, no clouds, no wind, just an ocean of black dotted with stars that looked close enough to breathe. Rodney had been outside, sitting on an old tire, smoking, wondering how the hell his life had become a loop of oil and loneliness. He remembered thinking about his ex-wife, about how she used to say God had a plan for everyone. Yeah, he muttered into the dark. Then he must have lost the paperwork. That's when the light appeared. At first, it looked like a plane's headlight, hovering low over the desert ridge. Then it split into 3, white, gold, and a faint blue that shimmered like it was underwater. No sound, no motion, just floating. Rodney blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. The lights pulsed, slow and rhythmic, almost like breathing. He thought maybe he was seeing heat distortion or some electrical flare. But when the lights began to move in a perfect triangle and then collapse into one point, his gut told him this wasn't human. The air changed. It wasn't wind. It was pressure, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. The cigarette fell from his mouth. He felt a vibration, deep and low, not in his ears, but in his bones. The light descended, not fast but deliberate, controlled. The sand around him began to shimmer. Rodney stood, ready to run, though part of him was rooted by awe. The light stopped 20 feet above the ground. Then it folded into itself like paper, leaving behind something that wasn't quite shape and wasn't quite light either. He could see through it, yet not. A figure emerged, a presence more than a body. It was tall, slender, and its edges seemed to breathe with faint colors that shifted like reflections on water. There were eyes, or maybe points of awareness, fixed directly on him. No mouth moved, but a voice entered his mind, calm, resonant, and absolutely unignorable. "Do not be afraid, Rodney Morrison." He staggered back, nearly tripping on a wrench left on the sand. "What the hell are you?" he said aloud, his voice trembling. "One who remembers," the voice answered. "One who comes when forgetting has gone too far." Rodney's heart pounded. "This is a dream. This has to be a damn dream." "You are awake. You have asked for proof, and it has come." "I didn't ask for anything." "You did the night before this one. You asked why God abandoned you." His throat went dry. He had said that aloud 2 nights ago, drunk, staring at the desert like it could answer back. The figure began to move closer, though the ground between them never seemed to shorten. The light surrounding it dimmed, revealing something that resembled a human outline, shoulders, arms, a form too symmetrical to be random, yet too fluid to be flesh. "We have come many times before," it said. "Always when your kind begins to forget who you are." Rodney swallowed hard. "You mean humans?" "Yes, you are fragments of the source, but you have built prisons of belief and called them truth. Jesus came to remind you, but his words were rewritten by those who feared their own power." He blinked, unable to comprehend. "Jesus? You're saying you knew him?" The light pulsed once. "He was one of us, clothed in your form, born to teach creation through certainty. He told you faith moves mountains because faith is alignment with Source. But your world turned his lesson into worship instead of remembrance." Rodney shook his head violently. That's insane. You're saying Jesus wasn't human? He was both, as are you.
The divine and the human are not separate. The veil exists only in your thought. You believe yourself fallen, so you live as though you are. Rodney's knees weakened. He sat down on the sand, staring at the impossible glow in front of him. If what you're saying is true, then what's the point of any of this? Church, sin, forgiveness, what's left? The being's light softened, almost tender. Responsibility. You are not punished by a god. You are shaped by your own certainty. Every thought is a seed. Every emotion waters it. The harvest is your life. Rodney felt tears burning his eyes, though he didn't know why. "You're saying I did this to myself? The divorce, the loss, the emptiness? You created experience to find yourself through it. Suffering is not punishment. It is contrast, a teacher."
"But many of you stay in the lesson long after it has been learned." He pressed his palms to his eyes, shaking his head. "I'm just a damn mechanic. I don't understand any of this." "You will," the voice said, fading slightly. "The time is near. 2026 will not be destruction, but revelation. What sleeps will awaken." Rodney looked up, heart racing. "What happens in 2026? The being tilted its head. "Or the space where its head should have been. You will remember what you are. Humanity will face its own reflection. Some will fear it, some will rise. The choice is creation." Before Rodney could speak again, the light withdrew, folding inward until only a faint shimmer remained. Then it was gone. The night returned. The desert was silent. But his heart was no longer the same. For 3 days after the encounter, Rodney barely spoke. He went to the garage, turned the key in a busted Chevy, and sat staring at the engine without fixing a single thing. His hands shook every time he thought about the light, about the words, 2026 will not be destruction, but revelation. He told himself he'd hallucinated it, that maybe the whiskey from that night had been bad, or maybe he'd finally snapped under the weight of years spent alone. But the sand outside the garage still shimmered faintly where the figure had stood, and every night since, the same low vibration hummed somewhere in the back of his skull, like a frequency only his mind could hear. When he closed his eyes, he saw it again. The being's light folding into itself. The calm certainty of that voice that seemed to know him better than he ever had. By the fourth day, he drove into town for supplies. The local store was run by an old couple, Ben and Marianne, who'd stopped asking questions about his reclusive life long ago. The fluorescent lights inside the shop buzzed like angry bees, and as Rodney stood by the shelf of canned beans, he caught his reflection in the freezer door. His own eyes looked different, brighter, or maybe just more awake. He turned away quickly, unsettled. At the counter, Ben asked, "You all right, Rod? You look like you've seen a ghost." Rodney forced a laugh that came out wrong. "Something like that." He paid and left before the man could reply. That night, he sat outside again, staring at the same stretch of horizon. The stars were out, silent witnesses to whatever had happened to him. He whispered, "If you're real, show me again." Nothing moved. The desert stayed dark and indifferent. Hours passed on. He finally went inside and collapsed on the cot, half angry at himself for believing even for a second. He dreamt that night, vivid, lucid, almost tangible. In the dream, he was standing in a place that wasn't the desert anymore, but a vast field of light. No ground, no sky, just infinite glow. Shapes moved through it, human figures, countless and radiant, each one pulsing with emotion like ripples in water. One of them turned toward him, and though its face changed constantly, young, old, male, female, he felt recognition. The same voice as before filled his mind. "You are not separate from us. You never were." When he woke, sweat clung to his skin. Though the room was cold, he looked at the clock. 3:33 a.m. The numbers glowed like a silent code. He remembered something the being had said. The choice is creation. But creation of what? His life? The world? He tried to shake it off, made coffee, and sat at the workbench. That's when he saw it. In the layer of dust covering an unused toolbox, a shape had appeared. 3 circles intersecting perfectly, forming a symbol he didn't recognize. It hadn't been there before. He traced it with a trembling finger. The metal beneath felt warm, almost alive. Later that morning, the power came back to the county, but not to Rodney's garage. The lights flickered once, then died again. When he checked the circuit, he found the wires untouched. No explanation. Outside, the sand glimmered faintly in the sun as if something beneath it was still alive. He tried to distract himself by working on a customer's pickup, but every time the wrench hit metal, he heard a faint echo, 3 tones, low and melodic like distant chimes. He dropped the tool and backed away, heart pounding. That evening, a knock came at his door. Few people ever visited him. When he opened it, a man stood there, middle-aged, wearing a weathered jacket with a sheriff's badge pinned to it. Sheriff Langford had known Rodney for years, mostly through silence and unspoken understanding. "Evening, Rod," he said. "We got reports of strange lights again out by the ridge last week. Some campers swear they saw something fall from the sky. You didn't happen to notice anything, did you?" Rodney hesitated. He could have lied easily, but the memory of that voice, the calm certainty, pushed through his fear. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I saw something." The sheriff studied him for a moment. "What kind of something?" Rodney exhaled. "Not a plane, not a drone. It was alive." Langford raised an eyebrow.
Alive? Light. It spoke, not with words, more like, thoughts. The sheriff's face softened slightly, pity mixed with caution. "You been sleeping okay?" Rodney almost laughed. "I don't think sleep fixes what I saw." Langford sighed, adjusting his hat. "You know how folks get around here. Start talking about aliens, next thing you know, you're the town ghost story." "I don't care what they think," Rodney said, "but something's coming. It told me
2026. The sheriff frowned. What's supposed to happen in 2026? I don't know, but it didn't sound like the end, more like a beginning. Langford studied him another long moment, then nodded slowly. You need anything, you call me, you hear? Rodney nodded, and the sheriff left, but the conversation lingered like static in the air. The next few nights, he couldn't stop thinking about the number, 2026. He started noticing strange coincidences. Receipts totaled $20.26. A gas pump stopped exactly at $20.26. Without his hand on it, the clock blinked 2026 military time every evening, right as he'd think about the light. The pattern was undeniable. On the seventh night, it returned. Not the figure this time, but the vibration. It started in his chest and spread outward like a wave. The room brightened, though no light was on. Then a voice, fainter than before, but unmistakable. The awakening has begun. You are one of many chosen to remember early. He stood, heart hammering. Chosen for what? To carry the frequency of remembrance. To live as proof that thought shapes world. What you believe, you become. What you feel, you summon. He clenched his fists. Then tell me how. How do I change anything? Gratitude for what is unseen. Certainty before evidence. Emotion as creation's fire. Begin with one thought, one feeling of peace, and the desert will answer. Then the glow faded, leaving him alone again. Outside, the night wind rose, sweeping across the sand. He stepped out barefoot, stood in the cold air, closed his eyes and whispered, I'm grateful. He didn't know for what. Just the words themselves felt alive. The air stilled. A single grain of light drifted down from the sky and landed on his hand, warm, glowing for just a second before vanishing. He looked at the empty space where it had been and realized something had answered. Rodney didn't sleep that night. The tiny grain of light that had landed on his hand kept replaying in his mind, looping between awe and fear. He sat by the window until dawn, half expecting another voice to speak, another vision to unfold. But morning came like any other, sunrise spilling over the desert, wind whispering through the sand, the soft creak of the metal garage waking with heat. For a while he convinced himself it hadn't happened. Then he looked at his hand. Right in the center of his palm, faint as dust, was a small circular mark that glowed only when the light hit it at a certain angle. He rubbed at it, but it wouldn't fade. He stared, heart thudding, realizing that whatever had touched him left something behind. By noon, he couldn't sit still. He drove out to the ridge where the first encounter had happened. The road stretched endlessly, cracked and golden beneath the sun. The place felt unchanged, just rocks, sand, and silence, but beneath the ordinary, something pulsed. When he stepped out of the truck, the air thickened, like the atmosphere itself was aware of him. He called out, "Are you here?" Nothing answered. Only the low whistle of wind across the canyon. He waited, hands shaking. "You said I could create," he muttered. Then show me how. He closed his eyes, remembering the voice. Gratitude for what is unseen, certainty before evidence. He took a breath and said quietly, I'm grateful for a sign. He didn't know what to expect. A light, a sound, maybe another vision. Instead, he heard something simple. The faint clink of metal behind him. He turned. Lying half buried in sand was a small object reflecting sunlight. He picked it up. It was a pendant, round, silver, engraved with the same triple circle symbol he'd seen in the dust on his toolbox. His pulse quickened. It was warm,
humming softly like a living thing. For a long time he stood there, staring at it. It didn't feel like coincidence. It felt intentional, precise. He pocketed it and drove back, every mile filled with questions he couldn't voice. That night he held the pendant in his palm while sitting on the cot. The hum seemed to sync with his heartbeat, calming him. He whispered, "What do you want from me?" The air shimmered faintly, not enough to see shapes, but enough to feel presence. A thought came, not words, more like feeling translated into language to remember what you already are. He didn't understand what I am. He thought of himself, failed marriage, empty garage, a man whose faith had died years ago. "I'm nothing," he whispered aloud, "just a man who fixes engines and hides from people." The response came instantly, soft but firm. "You are the engine and the light that moves it." He frowned, confused, but the meaning settled deeper than logic could reach. It wasn't flattery, it was truth spoken in vibration. He lay back, clutching the pendant, and for the first time in years, he slept without nightmares. The next morning, something changed. The world looked brighter, sharper, as though reality had been cleaned overnight. When he poured coffee, the smell was stronger, richer. When he stepped outside, colors seemed more alive. Even the silence of the desert felt full, not empty. As he looked out across the dunes, he whispered, "I'm grateful," without knowing why, and a sudden breeze swept across the sand as if responding. He smiled for the first time in months. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. A customer who'd owed him money for almost a year suddenly drove up with full payment and a box of food as thanks. The next morning, a letter arrived from his sister in Oregon, someone he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, saying she'd been thinking of him and felt compelled to reach out. Each event was small, but together they felt orchestrated. Every night, he thanked the unseen for the day, and every morning, something else unfolded, smooth, improbable, perfect. Then came the dream again, the field of light, the being standing closer this time. But now the light around it was gentler, like dawn breaking through fog. "You are aligning," the voice said, "but fear will test what you have remembered." He tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't work. He could only think the words. What kind of fear? The being extended a hand of pure radiance. The kind that hides inside belief. It will come through those who cannot see. The dream dissolved, leaving him gasping awake just before sunrise. That day, Sheriff Langford returned. The pickup rolled up in a cloud of dust, tires crunching on gravel. The sheriff stepped out, squinting against the light. "Morning, Rod. Mind if I come in?" Rodney nodded. Inside, Langford looked around the garage, eyes landing on the pendant resting on the workbench. "New necklace?" he asked.
Found it, Rodney said. Out by the ridge. Langford frowned. Same place you saw the light. Rodney nodded. You thinking what I'm thinking? Langford leaned closer. I think something's going on out there. I've had 4 reports this week. Lights, missing time, strange sounds. I don't believe in aliens, but people are scared. Rodney studied him. Maybe they shouldn't be. The sheriff tilted his head. You saying you know what this is? Rodney hesitated. He wanted to tell him everything. The voice, the teachings, the prophecy. But part of him knew the sheriff wasn't ready. Let's just say I don't think it's here to hurt anyone. Langford sighed. Rod, I've known you a long time. You're a good man, but if something's happening, we need to handle it right. Don't go playing prophet on me. Rodney met his gaze calmly. Maybe the prophets were just people who finally listened. The sheriff shook his head, uneasy. You sound like a preacher now. Maybe that's what we all are, Rodney said softly. Langford left soon after, but his words echoed in the quiet. That night, Rodney couldn't shake the warning from his dream. Fear will come through those who cannot see me. He went outside and sat on the sand again, staring up at the sky. If this is real, he whispered, if this is what you meant by awakening, then show me how to hold on when the fear comes. The response came as a pulse through his chest, warm and steady. Anchor through gratitude. Speak only what you wish to see. The rest will dissolve. He closed his eyes, letting the words sink deep. When he opened them, he noticed something he hadn't before. A faint aurora moving across the desert horizon, soft colors shifting silently like breath. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what was coming. The aurora over the desert lasted for nearly 10 minutes that night, a silent dance of color that turned the sand into waves of moving light. Rodney stood there, breath held, until it faded into the horizon. When it was gone, he felt something inside him had shifted again, like a door had opened and couldn't be closed. The next morning, the air itself seemed charged. He could feel it in his fingertips when he touched metal, in the static hum that filled the silence between the garage's walls. Every sound, every glint of light carried meaning he couldn't quite decipher, but somehow understood without words. The being's last message echoed inside him. Anchor through gratitude. Speak only what you wish to see. He began testing it. Small things at first. One morning, he whispered, "Let this old generator start easily." And it did. First try, something that hadn't happened in months. Another day, he said, "I'm grateful for good work today." And by afternoon, 2 customers arrived unannounced, each needing major repairs. It wasn't coincidence, it was cause and effect. Invisible, but exact. Each time it worked, the mark on his palm glowed faintly, reminding him it was real. He stopped praying the way he used to. Instead of asking, he began thanking, as if what he wanted already existed. And strangely, it always came. But with each answered intention, something else grew around him. A tension, subtle but present, like the world was watching. People in town began whispering. Word got around that Rodney Morrison, the quiet mechanic, had found religion again. Some thought he'd gone mad, others said he was touched by God. The sheriff stopped by twice that week, more curious than before. And one afternoon, a black SUV parked outside the garage. Government plates, tinted windows, two men stepped out, suits too clean for desert dust. "Mr. Morrison," the taller one said, I'm Agent Hale, this is Agent Carter. We'd like to ask you a few questions about recent aerial phenomena in this area." Rodney wiped his hands on a rag, keeping his tone even. "You mean the lights everyone's been talking about?" Hale nodded. "Yes. We have reason to believe a classified aircraft may have crashed or landed nearby. You're the closest resident to the ridge. Seen anything unusual?" Rodney hesitated. He thought of the being, the pendant, the dreams. He couldn't tell them the truth. "Just lights," he said finally. "Didn't see any wreckage." Hale studied him closely. "We have radar confirmation of something descending in this sector. Whatever it wasn't from any known craft." He paused, lowering his voice. "If you find anything out there, metal, debris, anything, call us first. Don't touch it." Rodney nodded, but inside he felt a flicker of defiance. Whatever had visited him wasn't debris. It was consciousness. It didn't belong to governments or programs. It belonged to everyone. When the agents left, he stood in the doorway, watching their SUV vanish into the desert. He whispered under his breath, "You won't find it. It's not meant for you." That night, the vibration returned stronger than ever, filling the entire garage. Tools rattled, the pendant on his workbench began to glow. He sat on the cot, heart pounding, as the air thickened into light. The being reappeared, softer this time, almost translucent. "They are searching in the wrong places," it said. "The key is not in the sky, but within the one who looks." Rodney stood slowly. "They know you were here. What do they want?" "Control," the voice said. "They fear what cannot be owned. But truth is not a possession, it is a frequency. And soon that frequency will rise beyond their reach. What happens then? The divide between thought and form will thin. Humanity will see their reflections made manifest. Those who live in fear will face fear. Those who live in love will awaken as creators." Rodney's throat tightened. "You mean what happens in 2026? "Yes, the threshold approaches. The solar alignment will magnify consciousness. Collective thought will determine what unfolds. That is why we came. To remind before remembrance becomes consequence." He sat down, overwhelmed. "You talk like I'm supposed to do something about it. I'm just one man." The light pulsed gently. One flame lights another. Your certainty shapes more than you know. Speak peace, and peace will ripple outward. The world listens to its own echo through you. The words struck deep, but fear crept in again. "What if I fail?" "You cannot fail. Creation does not punish, it mirrors. When you forget, remember again. That is the only law." The light began to dim. "Wait," Rodney said. "You said we. How many of you are there?" "Many, yet one. We are memory returned to form. And soon you will see others remember too." Then the glow folded into itself and vanished, leaving the garage silent, but charged with a sweetness that felt almost holy. Rodney sat there a long time, staring at the spot where the being had stood, until tears slid down his face without warning. He wasn't crying from fear or sadness, but from recognition. Something ancient inside him had been touched. The following days blurred into quiet revelation. He began to meditate, though he wouldn't have called it that. He simply sat still each morning, breathing, feeling the hum inside his chest, letting gratitude fill him. And every day, small miracles unfolded. A part he'd been waiting months for arrived early. A stranger stopped by just to say they felt drawn to his garage without knowing why. Even animals seemed unafraid. A coyote once approached within 10 feet, stared at him calmly, then walked away as though recognizing kin. But one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, he noticed movement near the ridge, 2 flashlights sweeping through the sand. The agents were back. He turned off his own light and watched from the darkness. They searched for hours, scanning the ground, measuring, recording. Around midnight, they set up a device, some kind of sensor. It emitted a low hum that made the pendant on his chest vibrate painfully. He clutched it, whispering, "Stop!" The hum intensified, shaking the walls. Then, as if in response to his fear, the air above the ridge erupted with blinding light. The agents stumbled back, shielding their eyes. A beam of white shot skyward, then split into 3, the same formation he'd seen the first night. Rodney stood transfixed, heart pounding. The light pulsed once, twice, then vanished without sound. Silence fell again. The agents ran toward their vehicle, shouting into radios. Rodney fell to his knees, trembling. He felt the vibration echo through the ground into his bones. A voice whispered faintly inside him, not from the sky this time, but from his own heartbeat. "Do not fear what watches. The revelation has begun." He stayed there long after the agents left, staring into the dark horizon, and for the first time, he realized something profound. The light wasn't returning to him, it was awakening within him. The next morning, the desert was silent again, as if nothing had happened. No scorch marks, no strange residue, not even footprints near the ridge. The agents were gone. Only tire tracks remained, already half erased by wind. But Rodney could feel it. The ground itself hummed faintly beneath his boots, like the earth had absorbed something too immense to vanish. He walked back to the garage in slow steps, unsure whether what had happened last night was a warning or an awakening. Inside, the air felt heavy, metallic. He sat on the cot, rubbing his hands together, staring at the faint glow pulsing beneath his skin. It had spread slightly. What was once a mark on his palm now reached the base of his wrist. It didn't hurt, but it carried weight. A sense of purpose he couldn't escape. He closed his eyes and whispered, "What are you doing to me?" No voice answered. Only the faint hum, like a distant current, moving through his veins. That afternoon, the sky turned strange again. An unnatural shade of silver, like sunlight, filtered through metal dust. Rodney stepped outside, shading his eyes. The town below the ridge was restless. He could sense it even from miles away. People were beginning to talk about the event. Cell service had been down since the previous night. Radios crackled with static. Some said the government shut down the networks. Others claimed it was the sun. Around sunset, an old truck crawled up the dirt road toward his garage. He recognized it instantly. It was Sheriff Lawson. The man looked uneasy when he stepped out. "You been out here all night?" he asked.
"Yeah," Rodney said. Lawson squinted toward the ridge. "Folks in town saw a light last night. Big one. Scared a few people half to death. You see it?" Rodney hesitated, then nodded. I saw it." "What was it?" "I don't know." The sheriff leaned against his truck, studying him. You know, I've been hearing your name a lot lately. Strange things happening around you. You fixing engines that shouldn't run. People saying you can feel when something's about to break before it does. You want to tell me what that's about? Rodney wiped his hands on a rag. Luck, maybe. Lawson shook his head. Ain't luck. Not all of it. Something's going on, and whatever it is, it's making people nervous. He paused, his tone softening. Look, I'm not saying I believe all the alien talk, but if you're caught up in something dangerous,
You need to tell me. Rodney looked out at the horizon. It's not dangerous, he said quietly. It's change. Lawson frowned. Change? You ever feel like something's watching, but not in a bad way? Like the world's alive and it's waiting for you to notice it? The sheriff stared at him for a moment, then sighed. Rod, I think you've been up here too long. When Lawson left, the silence returned thicker than before. Rodney walked out back to the flat stretch of desert behind the garage. He stood there until the stars appeared, so bright and close they looked like holes punched through the sky. He thought of what the being said. The divide between thought and form will thin. He wondered if that was already happening. He took a deep breath and whispered into the night, "If you can hear me, show me something real." For a moment,
nothing. Then, faintly, the air in front of him rippled, like heat rising from asphalt. The stars behind it blurred. Slowly, the shimmer condensed into shape. A sphere no larger than a basketball, floating 2 feet above the ground. It pulsed with the same soft rhythm as the mark on his wrist. Rodney didn't move. His heart pounded, but not from fear, from recognition. The sphere emitted no sound, yet his chest vibrated as if it spoke directly into him. You are stabilizing. He swallowed hard. What does that mean? Matter responds to coherence. You are learning to hold resonance without collapse. I don't understand. When fear rises, form distorts. When gratitude aligns, reality bends toward harmony. You are not changing the world, you are revealing it. The sphere pulsed again, brighter now. Rodney took a step closer. Why me? Because you listened when others forgot how. The word struck him like a blade. He wanted to ask more, but the sphere began to ascend, rising silently until it dissolved into the night sky, leaving only the echo of its glow on his skin. He stayed outside for hours, unable to move. The desert was utterly still. When he finally went back inside, he sat at the table and scribbled in his old notebook, the same one he'd used years ago to track repair jobs. He wrote everything down, the light, the being, the message, even the words, resonance without collapse. It sounded scientific, but the meaning was spiritual. For the next week, Rodney became obsessed. He stopped drinking. He started eating clean, waking before sunrise to meditate, breathe, listen. Each morning he repeated the same sentence. I am coherent, I am grateful, I am awake. And each day, strange alignments continued. Tools he lost appeared exactly where he needed them. The engine of a dead truck started the moment he touched the ignition. Even the weather seemed to follow him, clouds breaking when he stepped outside, wind rising when he whispered, clear. But with every miracle came new tension. His dreams turned vivid again, cities of light, people walking through sound, massive structures floating above oceans of fire. In one dream, the being appeared again, standing atop a mountain of glass.
They will come for what they cannot understand, it said, and you must not let them convince you that madness is truth. Rodney woke, drenched in sweat. 2 days later, the black SUV returned. This time there were 3 vehicles, 2 unmarked trucks behind it, agents again, but heavier armed. They didn't knock. They walked straight into his garage. Agent Hale's voice was colder now. "Mr. Morrison, we need to search the premises." Rodney stood by the workbench, calm but firm. "You got a warrant?" "This is a restricted investigation under federal jurisdiction. You can cooperate, or we can make this difficult." He didn't move. "You're wasting your time." The agents ignored him, sweeping the room with scanners, measuring electromagnetic fields. When one approached the pendant on the table, it began to glow faintly. Hale noticed. "What's that?" Rodney stepped between them. "Don't touch it." "Is it from the ridge?" He didn't answer. Hale reached forward anyway, and the light flared violently. Every bulb in the garage exploded. The machines shut down. For an instant, the air vibrated like a massive chord struck through reality itself. The agent stumbled back, shouting. When the light faded, the pendant was gone. Only a faint ring of scorched metal remained on the table. Hale glared at Rodney. "What did you do?" Rodney met his eyes steadily. "It wasn't me." The agent's radio crackled. "Sir, we've got a reading. Massive EM spike. East Ridge. Same coordinates as last time." Hale froze. Then, without another word, he turned and ran outside. The rest followed. Rodney stood alone in the dark, his hands trembling, his wrist still faintly glowing. Outside, the horizon flickered again, white light breaking through the clouds, and this time it wasn't silent. The sound was low at first, like a tremor beneath the desert floor, the kind that rattles glass but leaves the ground still. Then it grew, a resonant hum so deep it felt alive, vibrating through bone and metal. Rodney stepped outside and saw it. A column of light, far on the eastern ridge, rising straight into the clouds. It wasn't a beam from a machine. It was fluid, moving like smoke underwater, spiraling with color, too pure for his eyes to hold. The agents had already driven toward it, their headlights tiny insects against the horizon. Rodney stood motionless, the wind lifting dust around his boots. He felt drawn to it, as if the same energy running through his blood was calling him home. He started walking. The air thickened with each step, charged with static and something sweeter. A scent like rain before it falls. He crested a hill and saw the vehicles abandoned on the trail. The agents were nowhere in sight. The hum grew stronger. His skin prickled all. His pulse synced with it. Ahead, the column of light widened into a dome, translucent and breathing. Within it, faint shapes moved, figures or shadows impossible to tell. He hesitated. "I'm not ready," he whispered. A voice answered, not from outside, but from inside his skull. "Readiness is remembrance." The light expanded, washing over him before he could take another breath. The desert vanished. Sound folded into silence, and then he was standing somewhere else. A wide plain stretched endlessly beneath a golden sky. No sun, no stars, just radiant warmth from every direction. The air was thick with motionless wind. a contradiction that made no sense. Structures floated in the distance, geometric shapes of light, slowly rotating, dissolving, reforming, and standing before him was the being. It looked almost human now, taller, thinner, its surface shimmering between solidity and transparency. Its eyes were vast, liquid with compassion. Rodney felt small before it, yet not lesser. "You came back," he said. "You called," the being replied. "What's happening out there? Those agents, are they dead?" "They are suspended. Your kind's instruments cannot function in resonance. They will wake when the distortion ends." He looked around. Where is this? Between thought and form, the membrane of perception, the place your teachers once called the kingdom. Rodney frowned. "You mean heaven?" The being tilted its head. "Not a place, a frequency. Heaven is not where one goes, it is what one remembers." He struggled to take that in. "Then why show me this? Why me?" "Because you represent the fracture of faith. You believe and doubt in equal measure. You are what humanity is becoming, a species on the edge of awakening, frightened by its own reflection." The being extended its hand, light cascading from its palm. "Look." Before Rodney could react, the world shifted. He was suddenly standing in a stone courtyard, ancient, sunlit, filled with voices. Men and women gathered around a man in white robes, his eyes alight with calm authority. It took Rodney a second to realize who he was seeing. Jesus. He wasn't glowing. He wasn't otherworldly. He was human. Dust on his feet, laughter in his breath. Yet his presence radiated something beyond comprehension. He spoke softly to the crowd. Rodney couldn't hear words, but the meaning came through directly. "Do not seek the kingdom in the sky, for it is within you. The Father is not far away. The Father is thought, and thought is love." The people around him wept. One woman touched his robe, and light rippled from her hand through her whole body, healing her instantly. Rodney staggered back, overwhelmed. "That's real?" "As real as you allow it to be," the being said. "He was not sent to be worshipped. He came to remind you that creation obeys belief, that faith is not hope, it is certainty." Rodney's throat tightened. But religion was built by those who feared what he taught. Control is easier than remembrance. Images flashed before him, temples, wars, crowns, pulpits, priests shouting, armies killing in the name of a man who only spoke of love. Rodney fell to his knees. "We ruined it," he whispered. "You forgot it," the being corrected gently. But forgetting is not the same as losing. The vision shifted again. Now Rodney was back in his garage, years earlier. He saw himself younger, angry, drinking to numb the emptiness after his father's death. He saw every thought that had hardened into circumstance, the loneliness, the failure, the despair. Every pain you lived was your unawareness of your own creation, the being said. You are not punished by God, you are instructed by reflection. Tears filled Rodney's eyes. "You mean I did this to myself?" "Not as blame," the being replied, "as power. You cannot change what you deny creating. Once you claim authorship, you gain permission to rewrite." Rodney stood trembling. "Then what happens in 2026? You said there's a convergence. The being's form flickered brighter. In your time, perception will accelerate. Thought will manifest faster. Fear will feed upon itself, and love will multiply in equal force. Humanity will face itself without delay. So, Judgment Day. Not judgment, mirroring. The collective mind will see what it truly believes. Those who remain in gratitude will witness creation. Those who dwell in fear will call it destruction. Both will be correct. Rodney took a deep breath. Can we stop it? You can only align with it. The shift is not coming. It has already begun. 2026 will not be the end of the world, but the end of delay between cause and effect. The gap will close. Creation will answer instantly. He felt the truth of it vibrate through him. Then what am I supposed to do? Be coherent. Teach coherence. Show that faith is not a wish, but awareness of truth already fulfilled. The words you speak shape the air. The emotions you hold instruct, matter. Jesus demonstrated this when he thanked the bread before it multiplied. Rodney wiped his face. I don't know if I'm strong enough. The being stepped closer, its voice like 1,000 soft echoes. Strength is not required, only clarity. The light you saw on the ridge was not me arriving, it was you remembering. The golden landscape began to fade. The being's outline dissolved into a shimmer. Wait, Rodney cried, will I see you again? You will see me in everything that responds when you love, without asking why, and then the desert returned. The night was quiet again. The vehicles were empty. The light was gone. Only the stars watched from above, trembling faintly, as if alive. Rodney fell to his knees, shaking, tears cutting through dust on his face. He whispered into the darkness, Jesus, I understand now. The hum within his body settled into peace. He pressed his glowing wrist against his chest and felt it synchronize with his heartbeat. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of being alone. The desert morning felt different, cleaner somehow, like the air itself had been washed. When Rodney opened his eyes, the world looked sharper, edges more alive, colors slightly luminous. His first thought was simple. I'm still here. But beneath that, something deeper whispered, You are new. He stood outside barefoot, the sand cool beneath his feet, watching the sunrise bloom like a wound healing across the sky. Nothing around him had changed. Same rusted cars, same cracked tools, same silence. But inside, everything had shifted. The noise of fear that used to hum in the back of his mind was gone. In its place was stillness, and in that stillness, he could feel things, the weight of thought, the taste of emotion, even the subtle pulse of energy that linked every grain of sand to every star. For the first time in years, Rodney smiled without reason. He whispered into the empty air, All right, let's see if any of that was real. He picked up a wrench lying near the garage door and turned it over in his hands. He remembered what the being said. Thought creates. Emotion amplifies. Certainty manifests. He didn't fully understand, but he knew enough to try. He closed his eyes and imagined the broken generator sitting behind the garage, the one he hadn't been able to fix in 3 months. He pictured it running smoothly, heard its low hum, smelled the faint exhaust, and felt gratitude wash over him as though it were already true. He didn't beg, didn't hope. He simply knew. When he opened his eyes, he walked around back. The generator sat in the dust, wires still hanging loose. He crouched beside it, placed his hand on the metal casing, and whispered, "Thank you." For what, he wasn't sure, but the words felt right. He turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The sound filled the desert like laughter. Rodney stumbled backward, laughing too, tears in his eyes. It wasn't the machine that moved him. It was the understanding that he hadn't forced it. He hadn't repaired it with logic or labor. It had responded to something invisible. Over the next few days, he tested small things. He thought of water. And rain came that evening. He thought of an old friend calling, and an hour later the phone rang for the first time in weeks. Every time he expressed gratitude before seeing results, the results appeared. Every time doubt crept in, nothing happened. The pattern was unmistakable, but the more he experienced, the heavier the responsibility felt. If thought truly created, then every moment mattered. Every fear, every complaint, every flash of anger could shape reality as surely as joy or peace. It was freedom and burden all at once. By the fifth day, he was exhausted, not from work, but from awareness itself. He sat outside beneath the stars, talking to the night like an old friend. "I get it," he said softly. "Faith isn't believing something might happen, it's knowing it already has. But how do you live like that every second?" The wind shifted, warm and gentle, and a whisper moved through it, not a voice this time, but an understanding that formed inside him. By forgiving every thought that forgets. He breathed out slowly, letting that truth sink in. He realized faith wasn't about perfection. It was about returning, again and again, to the place where fear had no voice. Later that week, he drove down to the small diner in town. The waitress, Clara, had known him for years, the only person who ever asked how he was and meant it. When he walked in, she blinked in surprise. "Rodney Morrison," she said. "You look different. You finally quit drinking?" He grinned. "Yeah, cold turkey." She poured him coffee. "That explains the glow." He laughed, but she wasn't joking. The light beneath his skin had dimmed to human subtlety, but still shimmered faintly in certain light. He noticed her staring. "You ever think," he said, "that maybe we've been praying wrong?" She raised an eyebrow. "Praying wrong?" "Begging for what we already have. Hoping for what's already inside us, like asking the sun to rise while standing in daylight." Clara leaned on the counter. "That's poetic, Rod, but I don't see much daylight in this world." "Maybe it's not out there," he said, tapping his chest. "Maybe it's in here, waiting for someone to notice." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my grandma. She used to say the heart's a transmitter. What you send out, you get back." He froze. Those were almost the same words the being had used. He felt a chill of recognition. "Your grandma was right," he whispered. Clara frowned. "You okay?" Rodney nodded. "Better than ever." That night, back at the garage, he decided to test something bigger, not to prove it, but to understand it. He remembered the being's words. Gratitude aligns reality. So he chose something simple, yet impossible. He wrote a single word in his notebook. Feather. Then, beneath it, he wrote, "I give thanks for the feather that finds me tonight." He closed the notebook, set it on the table, and went to bed. Hours later, he woke to a faint tapping. At first, he thought it was wind against the window, Then he heard it again, soft, deliberate. He sat up, turned on the lamp, and froze. A single white feather rested on the windowsill, perfectly still despite the breeze outside. He reached for it, and the moment his fingers touched it, warmth spread through his chest, the same resonance he'd felt when the being appeared. He whispered, "I believe you now." The next morning, as sunlight filled the garage, he saw the agent's SUVs parked far down the road again, but this time they didn't approach. Maybe they were afraid, maybe they'd seen enough. Rodney didn't care. He wasn't hiding anymore. He knew what he'd found couldn't be taken or explained away. He sat at his table, feather beside the notebook, and wrote, "In 2026, the world will remember what Jesus tried to show us, that faith is creation, not submission. The distance between thought and form will vanish, and every heart will reveal its truth." He stared at the sentence for a long time, then added, "May I be ready to meet myself." That night he climbed to the top of the ridge where the being had first appeared. The wind howled around him, sharp and cold, but inside he felt only warmth. He raised the feather toward the sky. "If you're still out there," he said, "thank you." No voice answered. No light appeared. Yet, for the first time, he didn't need proof. The silence itself felt divine, as though the entire desert had become a heartbeat. And it was his own. Winter came to the desert like a whisper. Cold mornings, still nights, wind carving slow rivers through the dunes. Months had passed since the night of the convergence. To anyone else, nothing seemed different. The world still spun, the news still screamed, and the same tired anger filled every broadcast. But Rodney saw it differently. He noticed how people's words seemed to shape their days faster than before. A man in town muttered that his truck would probably break down, and it did, that same afternoon. A woman who spoke of her dying crops found them green again the next morning after thanking the earth aloud. It was subtle at first, almost hidden, but unmistakable. The world was responding quicker now, just as the being had said. Rodney lived simply. He fixed engines, helped neighbors, wrote in his notebook. He no longer felt the need to preach or convince anyone. Instead, he practiced coherence quietly. Gratitude at sunrise, stillness at night, forgiveness between. People noticed, though. They came to his garage not just for repairs, but for peace. They said the place felt different, like stepping out of static into silence. Some called it energy. Others called it prayer. Rodney just called it remembering. One evening, a stranger arrived, a young man named Eli, thin, nervous, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He parked a dusty van outside and asked if Rodney could take a look. The engine was fine. Rodney knew it before opening the hood. The problem wasn't metal, it was fear. "You look like you haven't eaten in days," Rodney said, handing him water. Eli nodded. "I've been driving since Nevada. I saw lights out here last year, thought it was a UFO. People online said someone around this area might know the truth." Rodney leaned back, watching him carefully. "What kind of truth you looking for?" "The end," Eli said flatly. "I read things about 2026, the alignment, the frequency shift. Some say we're doomed." Rodney smiled faintly. "We're not doomed, we're mirrored," Eli frowned. "Mirrored? You'll see what you believe," Rodney said. "If you expect destruction, that's the shape the change will take. If you expect healing, that's what you'll get. The world doesn't choose, it reflects." Eli stared, confused. "So what, it's all in our heads?" Rodney shook his head. "No, it's in our hearts. Thought starts it, emotion powers it, certainty makes it real. Jesus tried to tell us that. The name hung between them like a challenge. Eli scoffed. Jesus? You mean religion? Not religion, Rodney said softly. Remembrance. He wasn't trying to build churches. He was showing us how creation works, how to speak light into form. Eli looked down. If that's true, why is the world falling apart? Because we forgot who we are, Rodney said. But forgetting isn't permanent. Look around. The signs are everywhere. The veil's thinning. You're here because you felt it. The young man's eyes shimmered. I just want to stop being afraid, Rodney nodded. Then stop feeding it. Fear survives on attention. Gratitude starves it. You will want a miracle? Start thanking life before you see it change. That night, Eli slept on the cot in the corner of the garage. Before dawn, Rodney woke him gently and took him outside. The horizon was pale gold. Say something true, Rodney said. Eli rubbed his eyes. What? Say something you wish was true, but speak it like it already is. Eli hesitated. I'm free. Good, Rodney said. Now feel it. Not with words, with your whole body. Feel what freedom would feel like if it were real right now. Eli closed his eyes. The wind moved softly around them. For a moment, the air brightened, barely perceptible, like the desert exhaling. When Eli opened his eyes, he looked lighter, as if a layer of shadow had peeled away. He whispered, I felt that. Rodney smiled. Then it's real. Word spread quietly. A few more people began coming. Farmers, truckers, even the sheriff. They didn't come for answers, they came for stillness. Rodney didn't claim to be a teacher, but he found himself speaking words that didn't feel entirely his own. You can't beg reality to love you, he'd say. You can only realize it already does. He watched their faces soften, the way fear drained when understanding clicked. In town, strange coincidences multiplied. A woman who prayed for rain found it pouring minutes later. A child who said his dog would come home saw it limping through the gate that same evening. People stopped calling them coincidences and started calling them reminders. Even the skeptical sheriff began to wonder aloud if maybe the old ways were returning. By spring, the internet buzzed with talk of global anomalies, thoughts manifesting, weather responding to emotion, electronic devices failing during moments of mass meditation. Scientists argued, preachers panicked, governments denied. But deep down, everyone knew something had shifted. Humanity's mirror had come alive. One night, Rodney sat on his porch with Clara from the diner. She'd driven out to see him after closing. The stars were bright, almost painfully so. They say next year's the tipping point, she said quietly. March 2026. Some kind of energetic convergence. Rodney nodded. It's not a date on a calendar, it's a doorway. When enough people remember, the delay between thought and reality disappears completely. And then what? Then the truth shows up everywhere, instantly. Clara sipped her coffee. That sounds terrifying. It's not, he said. Unless you've been lying to yourself. She laughed softly. So what happens to the rest of us, those still figuring it out? He looked at her, eyes calm. No one's left behind.
You can't fall out of what you already are. They sat in silence for a long while, the wind carrying the scent of rain from somewhere unseen. Finally, she said, Rodney, what did that being really tell you about Jesus? He hesitated, then spoke slowly. That he was the first human who remembered fully. He didn't come to save us from sin. He came to show us sin was just forgetting. He said, the Father and I are one. And we turned that into worship instead of understanding. Clara looked down. Maybe we weren't ready. Maybe, Rodney said softly. But we are now. The clock on the garage wall ticked steadily in the background. Midnight came and went. In the quiet, Rodney could feel something building in the air, a pulse, distant yet undeniable, like the breath of the planet itself deepening. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It's starting." And far off on the horizon, a single flash of light answered, brief, silent, and shaped like a cross made of gold fire, fading slowly into the clouds. The morning of the convergence arrived like any other, yet the air itself felt charged. Rodney woke before sunrise, barefoot on the cold desert sand, and felt the pulse of the world under his feet. The vibration had been building for weeks, subtle at first, now undeniable. He could feel it in the muscles of his legs, in the tremor of his hands, in the whispering wind that seemed to breathe in rhythm with his heartbeat. Everything was waiting. Not just him, not just the desert, but everything that had ever been, every thought, every prayer, every longing, every fear. The threshold was here. He didn't wake anyone. Clara, Eli, even the sheriff had sensed it. But this was a moment that demanded stillness. Rodney walked toward the ridge where the being had first appeared, the pendant now warm against his chest. He felt the resonance in his bones, the low hum of creation answering his presence. Thoughts no longer needed shaping. He could feel the collective consciousness of humanity aligning, stretching, remembering what it had long forgotten. The desert itself seemed to rise and fall with the pulse, dunes trembling like a slow ocean tide. As the sun broke the horizon, light spilled across the desert, painting everything in gold. And then it began. A subtle shimmer appeared in the sky, spreading like a ripple across the atmosphere. Patterns formed, geometric, luminous, fractal. They twisted and folded, responding to the rhythm of thought itself. Rodney raised his arms instinctively, feeling the energy pool around him, a wave of coherence waiting to be released. It was beautiful beyond comprehension, not bright like fire, but alive, moving in a language older than words. He realized he was seeing not the world, but the memory of the world, the blueprint of existence as it had always been intended. Humanity's thoughts, emotions, and fears were visible in the sky as waves of light. Fear churned violently, jagged reds and black, while gratitude shimmered soft gold and violet. Those who remembered love, truly, fully remembered, glowed like stars against the dark. Rodney closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. He whispered, "I remember." The air pulsed in response. He didn't move his hands, didn't gesture. He didn't even hope. He knew. A warmth spread from his chest outward, as if his certainty itself was a force radiating through space. Slowly, deliberately, he allowed gratitude to fill him. First for life, for the desert, for the breath in his lungs, then for all of humanity, all their joys and failures, all their hidden, whispered prayers. And as he gave thanks, the light responded. Jagged reds softened, black melted into silver and gold. The world was reflecting coherence instead of fear. He felt movement behind him. Clara, Eli, and a few others had arrived silently, drawn by the resonance. Rodney didn't need to speak. They knew, without words, what was happening. Together, they breathed, aligned, and for the first time in human history,
A small group of people experienced collective creation at the speed of thought. Then he saw it, the being, not in flesh or light, not in form or shape, but in vibration, in presence. It was everywhere, in every particle, in every reflection of consciousness. It was both alien and divine, both other and intimately human. It is not above. It is within. Rodney understood. The being had never left. It had simply waited for humanity to notice. He lifted the pendant, now glowing like a heartbeat. "Thank you," he whispered. For the first time, he wasn't speaking to an outside entity. He was speaking to himself, to the totality of existence, and the desert answered. Dust and sand spiraled upward, caught in invisible currents, forming symbols of life, love, and unity above them. Symbols humans had seen in every religion, every art, every dream, suddenly understandable, their meaning obvious. We are one. We always were.
And then he remembered the words the being had spoken months ago. The divide between thought and form will thin. Those who live in love will awaken as creators. Now he felt it. The membrane collapsing, the illusion of separation dissolving. Thoughts streamed into reality instantly. A child's hope manifested as birds appearing mid-flight. A man's prayer for water caused a small stream to curve across the desert floor. Rodney realized that creation was not magic, not luck, not divine intervention. It was remembering, knowing, living as if the law of love was tangible, as if every thought was a command whispered into infinity. The moment was silent yet deafening. Time itself seemed to hesitate.
Rodney felt tears on his cheeks, not from fear, not from doubt, but from the recognition of the truth he had spent years running toward. Jesus had said, "The kingdom is within you." Now he saw it, not as metaphor, but as living law. Every human heart, every conscious being was a node of creation. Every emotion, every belief, every certainty or fear shaped the world as surely as hands shaping clay. The light in the desert grew, spiraling higher, stretching farther. It touched every horizon, reaching the towns, the cities, the oceans. It was not the light of a single being, it was the reflection of remembering itself. And Rodney understood one final, crushingly simple truth. Humanity had never been powerless. Humanity had merely forgotten. He sank to his knees, arms open, and whispered again. "Thank you." The resonance pulsed, reaching a crescendo, then settled into a quiet hum, a vibration like a heartbeat shared across continents. The shift was complete, yet subtle. The world would not notice immediately. Some would panic, some would embrace, some would deny. But the law had already taken hold. Thought creates, emotion amplifies, certainty manifests. The proof was everywhere, waiting for recognition. When he finally stood, the desert was calm again. Clara touched his shoulder gently. "Rodney, it worked. I think it really worked." Rodney nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "It didn't start with us. It started when someone remembered. It started when someone believed the kingdom was not somewhere else but in themselves. We just remembered together." He looked out across the ridge at the horizon, now quiet, the air still vibrating faintly, like an echo of eternity. He felt complete, not triumphant, not invincible, just awake. That night, Rodney sat in his garage, writing in his notebook one last time, Jesus never taught us to worship him. He came to remind us who we are. Creation obeys belief. Faith is certainty. Gratitude aligns reality. The world reflects our hearts. In 2026 we remembered. He paused, running his hand over the pendant still warm against his chest. The alien had left a gift, but it had been nothing tangible. It had been recognition itself, the law of consciousness. He could feel it in every beat of his heart, every breath, every thought. He closed his eyes and whispered into the silence, "Thank you for everything." And for the first time in decades, Rodney Morrison slept without fear, without doubt, entirely at peace. He was alive, fully alive, and he understood. The stars above the desert pulsed faintly, like soft echoes of what had been remembered. And somewhere, in every conscious being, the universe itself exhaled.